back again. Okay, this is a discussion about where we're at, the issue of sets, groups, and fuckers, temporal markers, projections, the summer of change, and countdown. Okay, and so we can start with some of the things that bring focus to this moment. There's cables and stuff all over here, and I've been injured by a magnet that blew itself to shit in my experiments. But everything's good. We're doing fine. Okay, so here's our temporal marker. This fellow with his gun defending his house in St. Louis. It was a gated compound. It's a mansion. There were armed people on both sides of the issue. It was the mob going through the gated area, and it was forecast in some of the reports way back when, conjunct with 250 houses being damaged. Now, there were not 250 houses damaged in this gated compound. It's just that the sets of language appeared on the very same day. We have this story as well as repeated stories out of China of forced demolition of an approved subdivision in which there were 250 plus houses that have so far been destroyed under authority or under the authority of the Communist Party of China, even though they'd already permitted them, allowed them to be built and all of this stuff. Then they come along and destroy them later. And there was the reaction of the people that lived in those houses, as was described in those reports and some of the interviews I had done about it. And so we have one of these things where data sets were, we had I had the set, the language, the linguistics, the wording, the mood, and the conjunction of all of these words within this larger set, because our stuff worked. When I designed the software, I did it on the idea of fuzzy set theory, which is this odd little side cul-de-sac in mathematics. In any event, though, so now we have the manifestation of this. So I was totally off on time, approximately 2 years and 4 months on the emergence of the whole set. Okay, not this particular incident, but the emergence of the whole set. And that's because in the understanding of how these sets arise, we have this would be our set of words. This is time, and we're here now. Okay, so this is the set, this is time, we're right here now. All of these words in the set are going to flow through our reality in their conjunctions, as was described if the theory on how this stuff works and its accuracy so far were to continue. And we would find ourselves, as we moved forward in time, we would be encountering more and more of the described language in the conjunctions as described, such as we are seeing here now with the armed mobs and with the house destruction and so on. But some of the set has already started to appear 18 months back maybe, and we just weren't aware of it at that point. And as we get forward more and more and more, and then we'll get to this point here at some undetermined point of time, and we will see the manifestation of the primary, secondary, tertiary aspects and their attributes within this set. So every set of words is dominated by a primary linguistic element. That's no good. It's black. Okay, so every set is dominated by a primary aspect, attribute, subset, a secondary, which is related to and modifies the primary, and then a tertiary set of exactly the same kind of construction of aspects and attributes. And it's from this this group here that we extract most of the prescient language that appears to be presenting itself. And so this part of the set, this span in here for this set of words might only be 28 days. And it's just that the nature of the flow through time is not part of the timing placement of the temporal markers for the sets, okay? So some sets appear to us and we get a temporal marker that we can pull out. And that usually is some kind of an image, some kind of a word description that is unique, that such as the fellow here with his weapon and his wife out there defending their house, the mob flowing through the gated compound, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, it forms a nice tight little word bundle that we can provide a little story around, and that's what went into the reports. And okay, so some of these temporal markers are shocking, concise, easily found, and are relatively not part of any of the major dominating descriptor sets, but just simply happen to appear. And so we might see them back out here, and so we may have a temporal marker that appears on the other side of the dominating descriptors, and they would have appeared first. And we may be in a situation now where we're going to have a number of these temporal markers show up. Usually that's the way it is. So in a sense, all of these sets, to a certain extent, look like cells, because we have these temporal markers that are scattered throughout in a temporal fashion. Okay, they're a time marker within the set. And usually what it means is that by the time we see this appearing here, we can predict we're very close to this next one. And we can predict from this one that we're very close to those two. Now, in my reports, I attempted to apply timing and be able to predict the span here, the temporal span between these. And usually that was really, really, really fucked up, okay, because of all kinds of issues, because the amount of variability in here is fantastically huge. And I was only looking at maybe 3 or 4 out of a million different kinds of elements that affect all of the temporal span here. And I was looking at it in a very broad fashion, okay? So that aspect of it gets really screwed up. But the cool part is that the temporal markers are in fact linked as we go through in time, and some of them may indeed be part of this. It's not a set ratio. There's no it's extremely variable because language and people are extremely variable. And so we find ourselves at a position right now where I know that some of those sets have already manifested. Okay, so this has already happened over here. And so it's in our past. So I know that. And then today, when I get up and I see this guy here with his wife and their guns and the insurrectionists out there walking by and not hassling them, and then right below it, in the Twitter feed is the first pointers to video of the Chinese Communist Party destroying the houses and the owners of those houses resisting. So all of this language shows up. Now, so we're right at this point right here, and there are a number of temporal markers that lead us over here, but the defining characteristic of this set is that it's sci-fi world. Within that sci-fi world descriptor set, a defining primary attribute with many, many, many aspects was secrets revealed. Within the secondary supporting set, which was actually one of the attributes of that set, and that was quite common. Again, no rhyme to reason. Sometimes the sets had that, sometimes they didn't. So within the secrets revealed subset of sci-fi world, and this was a big modifier and a big booster and a big emotional booster too, was the idea of the release of secret tech. Okay, so which we'll all know as my floating RVs, or free energy, or however you think of it, right? Who knows? Who knows what it is? And it won't be full blown at the time that it's released. It's an entrance into the society. So in one sense, you can think of this particular subset as pointing to a similar occurrence as to what happened in the period from 1947 through until the 1960s, as all of this technology was fed into the academic system and then later on into our corporate production facilities, okay? As that technology was fed in, we end up with the computer systems we have now, fiber optics, networks, yada, 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 satellites, all this other shit. Okay, we're going to go through another one of those episodes that it is analogous to the let's say the 1950s, the middle of that chunk, right? Big, full blown. But it's not going to happen the same way because of the destruction of the universities and all these other things that were also forecast. So within this set here was the universities crapping out, people not going, kids not going back, economic failure of the universities, academicians running out after the universities failed, trying to sell off whatever the hell they could just to make a living, very much like the Soviet scientists, that sort of thing. And that part of it right there, that temporal marker of the collapse of the universities and the academicians, the scientists, the research people trying to sell off their stuff that they've been working on and been funded by funding sources that are now kaput, feeds into and is a modifier to the secondary modifier, which is the secret tech. Only a lot of the stuff that's going to be coming on out is like way deep, compartmentalized crap from the government, right? So I was always quite excited about this particular time. It's going to be a hell of a time to be alive. It is a hell of a time to be alive. There's all kinds of nasty shit going on, and we just have to navigate through it to get to the point here where we can say, oh, whew, that's past. And this might take us 3, 4, 5 years. I don't know. It might be 15, might be 20. I have no idea how the distance of span of that entire set. I was just with my crude predictive linguistics approach able to pick out temporal markers and an overall defining descriptor, as well as some of the level of emotional rising and falling, positive and negative language that would manifest during this time. And so I'm saying, yeah, this is a hit. This guy with the gun, it's a temporal marker that was described a few years back in one of the reports. The conditions that we're going through right now, indeed, also were described a few years back in one of the reports. And so we get to the idea that these sets are manifesting. And so the timing was really fucked up on the overall set. And there's no rhyme or reason, nothing I can say as to when the first appearance of the language. So I can look back and say, oh, look, some of this language was actually manifesting a year ago when I wasn't paying attention. And now all of a sudden we've got this major temporal marker, and we're going to be getting a major temporal marker of the guy with his weapons, the mobs, etc. Then we're going to be getting into this interconnection of all of these other temporal markers that should be manifesting here. As I say, I don't know how long the whole span is, but I can tell you that the defining characteristic, the ability for us to say sci-fi world manifested in this month or in this week, that will be defined sometime in the next 6 months. And I think because of the language at the time that we got into it with the reports, I think this defining primary point of sci-fi world will appear in the month of July or August. So it's my understanding that we'll cross a particular critical temporal marker threshold in these 2 months. And thus, this period of time right here will be relatively short. But it may be that from that point on out to there is another 4 years for all I can say at this juncture. it is very interesting watching this appear. I am building some software that I can use to just tabulate, just keep track of the manifestation of language in these previous sets, such that I could, if I wanted to go that route, go back and attempt to apply timing value corrections. So in that sense, having lived through it now over a course of a number of years, looking backward, I can say, oh, okay, this value was way the fuck off, or this one was pretty close, here's how to adjust that one, and so on. And so it would be an easy, hindsight 2020, it would be a lot easier to do it with what I know now, of course. All right, so that's our set and temporal marker discussion. All right. So we have the issue of groups, and this is linguistic groups as well. So groups of language are manifesting relative to the current culture war. So in a sense, it's not really a civil war, okay? It's a culture war. In very much like communism taking over Russia, the communists didn't simply want to force everybody to share. All right, that was their goal. Just like Black Lives Matter wants to force everybody to give black people lots of money for reparations and other sharing things. Okay, but very much like that, we have a reemergence of a religious fervor. Okay, so that's probably the best way to think about it. So the current upheaval in the social order is very much akin to the upheaval of the clash of religions in the past within a culture. So we find the same kind of language and emotional extremism within the language of today that we do with the Reformation of the Catholic Church, the rise of the Lutherans, the breakdown of the Cathars, and the church's relationship. All of these religious collisions occurred within a short period of time. And I'm putting them down to the strange energies from space. It's just a handy, easy way to think about it, because it appears that it was not organic, wasn't internally driven. It came from the outside. It caused these things to occur and manifest. Now, whether it manifested by design or by chaotic confluence and happenstance appearing as design, who could say? And it's also not my point to care about that. Any being capable of manipulating things at that level of time and across that span of time is so far beyond my ability to interact with that there's no point, right? It would be as though I could think I could stand here and push Earth a particular direction. It's never going to happen. So, but my point in dealing with groups this way, in dealing with the association of linguistic emergence within our manifesting, disorganized, chaotic social flow, is to be able to understand and apply some of the temporal mathematics that I'd been working on within my software. And so when groups of sets, okay, so the reports are essentially made of groups of sets, of being able to do Venn diagram kind of intersections around various different themes, where the various sets, that, like I just described, would appear and would be colored by their interactions with other sets. And it is from this interaction of the sets as subsets of groups, which are basically just very large sets, but don't have descriptors within them and only deal at the primary, secondary, and tertiary modifiers. Okay, so the point of dealing with them this way is that we do get this kind of an effect, where one set in one boundary area might be very large and being affected by this little area right there. And that's what was one of the signifiers that points me to temporal markers. Okay, so long-winded way of saying I go through giant lists of words that are associated with numeric values that are clustered by the software that I wrote that chunks it up into something approximating this. And what really intrigued me was always these areas of isolations of sets within sets within sets, where we would have interactions at an emotional level, and that would manifest as our social change that we're seeing at the moment. Now, so in that sense, I can tell based on how all of this itself, how time flows through all of this and it all manifests, that all of this shall pass, right? We're in a period of time where these strange energies from space are causing these manifestations. And I'm quite frankly shocked at how rapid it is. I thought it was because of history, because of the way things have been in the past. I did not anticipate how rapid, once manifesting, these things would unfold. Now, I did anticipate that a lot of that rapidity would be unknown. In other words, at the time I made the projections, I said I couldn't tell how rapidly it would unfold, but I sort of didn't think it would be that fast. The rapidity of the unfolding is amplified by the communications that, such as I'm using at this moment, and the ability to magnify with just a click and send it off on its way. So that's going to accelerate, it's going to snowball. So it may be from our previous diagram that we're only looking at about a month's transit between now and another major manifestation near the end of July that will be more full-blown as we go into August, that will totally change the narrative. All right, totally change the COVID narrative, totally change the riots in the streets narrative, totally change the racism narrative, and it's like, what the fuck is it going to be? And I've got some hints, and we've got some hints in those reports, but the which temporal marker is in relation to which within the larger set, that's again the variability aspect of all of this. So I can't say for sure which of the many temporal markers in this very rich set of predictive linguistics around sci-fi world will show up next, but we're heading towards our secrets revealed moment. The secrets revealed moment may occur, and it will have to build. So all these things never manifest fully blown in everybody's consciousness all at once. Anything that would occur like that would be a disaster. What we're looking at is not a total disaster for the planet, right? What we're looking at is the manifestation of the summer of change. From the point that this thing occurs, that's when we will define the summer of change as having manifested. And the change is going to be ongoing for maybe hundreds of years. Who knows? We're talking massive changes here as a result of whatever it is we've got coming at us. The summer of change is antithetical. It is antipodal. Okay, so it's the opposite of so many different things because it was in the center of these sets as they overlapped within groups. And we're in the group that was labeled sci-fi world, and we're within the set that was labeled sci-fi world, and we're about to merge and go into the set that was labeled secrets revealed. One of the things about the way in which the data was collected and the projections were made, it was ascertained early on that the longer that it showed up in the language in a building tension fashion, the more impact it would have when it finally manifested. And this was analyzed against a number of events from 2001 onward. So domination within the language and continued domination month after month after month after month meant that whatever the hell it was going to be a very big thing indeed when we got there. And what we would see it as is kind of like the camel's snout here. This is a very crude and that's the camel's tail. Okay, and we won't go into where the camel shit comes out of, all right? But so basically what happens is that when it manifests here in terms of our summer of change, it will have to grow emotionally until we will recognize it at that stage. So the language has already started, in my opinion. We've seen some of the temporal markers. Maybe we're at the ear level here, and we're about to get to the butt, which is to say the conclusion of this particular small subset within the Secrets Revealed larger group. Because Secrets Revealed was with us for 20 years, growing and growing and manifesting and splitting and growing. Now look what we've got. We've got all these secrets coming out of all of the people, everything like that. No secrets are safe. You dare not, it's just phenomenal how much Secrets Revealed dominates our lives now. And it's actually gotten to the point where who gives a rat's ass? Well, that's a camel, but who gives a rat's ass? Because in the age of information, nothing is trustworthy because it's so easy to create fake information. So you have to learn to think in first principles and analyze on your own. And that's where we're at now within our social order. And so the projections are from those data sets that we're going to get and have a very interesting summer indeed, that it's just really started at this point. It won't be mature until probably, maybe in August, we'll recognize a particular event that happened in the last few days of July was extremely significant for where we are in August and for where we will be in September, October, November, etc. And that narrative will be the third in our big stories that the media is going to get involved in, right? Because they've had COVID for all this time. Now they've had racism / riot / protest as their secondary story that is falling away, and now we're going back to COVID, and they're getting kind of tired of that, so they need something new, and we're about to run into whatever the hell the media is going to use, in their feeding frenzy over these next few months. I have some hints, I have some ideas, but I'm not going to go into them in this particular video because it's not appropriate, and I'm going to get a better view of which ones are likely as we get closer to the event. But the last thing to talk about here is that I think that indeed we've begun the countdown into sci-fi world. Now, just because sci-fi world emerges, the first parts of it say 30 days from now, 29 days from now, something like that. Just because it emerges is not to say that everything's going to be cool and we'll be flying around in George Jetson floaty ships and have little robots doing all of our household chores the next month. It isn't going to happen that way, but it will be a huge social order changing manifestation as it grows. And I'll go into the growth rate and how that was projected in one of the in a future video, and we can examine to see how close that manifests as it comes on out, and we'll see which of these central themes, which of these central temporal markers are going to lead us through into the sci-fi world, secrets revealed, etc., etc. As we go forward on this. I'll try and get a couple more videos in before any significant manifestation, but I couldn't be caught out. Okay, so it might happen tomorrow. Might not be the end of July. It might be the end of this month for all I know. The temporal markers are sneaky buggers. In any event, though, but we are in the countdown. It's not the summer of love. It's not an echo of the 60s. Far from it. In many ways, it's more an echo of the 1890s. And there will be people that there will be some people that will understand that. But it's an undoing and it's antipodal. So I believe it was 1887, I'm a dyslexic, so it could have been 1878, but in that period of time, an event occurred that defined our modern world, and you are still suffering under that event, and this was one of the very first elements of massively promoted fake news. And that event in that period of time in the 1800s, late 1800s, is about to die. And this is tremendous news for us because it means we'll get into real science. We won't be blinded by this academic bullshit that has steered us wrong all these last 100 years and crippled our species. It also means that royalty and the elites are going to perish, that we're now coming into the true age of the individual, of powerful individuals as a result of their own effort in a way that's never been able to be achieved before. All as a result of what we're going to be going through in this summer of change that's going to echo and destroy that terrible evil thing that occurred in the late 1800s, in the late 1870s or late 1880s, in that period of time. And it's, well, I'll get into it at some point. There's a few people that know what the fuck I'm talking about, and everybody else is going to say, uh-oh, he's gone batshit crazy again. But at the time that this next temporal marker manifests, and I can point to the words, I'll be able to say, look, it's 100% antipodal to what occurred back then. And I'll be proven right once again. Not that I give a shit, guys. It's not an ego thing for me. It's a paranoia thing. That's what everybody, I get all these people saying, oh, well, he's all ego-driven and shit. No, guys. I'm simply paranoid. I don't want to be crushed by future events if I have the ability to look out there. It's like when I was a kid, I used to watch these cartoons, and you'd see in the cartoons, you'd see the giant boulder rolling down and crushing the Viking village. And it's like there was always one guy that comes on out in the morning and he's stretching and he's going on out and he goes over to the ravine and he pees. And just as he's doing that, he looks behind him and the boulder rolls over his house, right? I just want to avoid having boulders roll over my house, whether I'm got to pee or not. So anyway, with respect, it's going to be a very, very, very interesting summer.